call, so nobody, we didn't have anybody disappear, did we? No.
No.
We look like we're good. Okay, we are governed by the Freedom of Information Act, so anybody who wants a copy of this meeting can get it at City Hall. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes from the previous meeting?
Motion.
Motion is a second, all in agreement?
Aye.
Okay. All right, do we have any personal appearances? Okay.
No.
Any citizens' comments?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Unfinished business that anybody knows of? Okay. All right, new business is ordinance 0521. Are you doing the presentation? Who's
Yes,
doing the
ma'am.
presentation? Okay.
I don't think that.
And this, I think we emailed this out, but, no one signed up to speak or offer testimony on this ordinance, and we've got no comments on the ordinance, and I don't have a copy of it in front of me, but I can tell you what it is that in our codes, we reference high ground for lot area, lot coverage, maximum heated square footage, those sort of things, but it was a little unclear in one of the places whether or not we were referring exclusively to high ground. So the amended ordinance, which exists electronically, I promise, it basically clarifies that the city's definition of lot area is based on high ground. So if you have a lot that's, say, planted on the marsh and it's 500 acres, but only 1 acre of that is high ground, that's the number we'll use to calculate your allowable lot coverage and maximum heated square footage, the high ground area of the lot, not the entire area of the lot.
And high ground means the area above, what's the definition of high
It's
ground?
exclusive of any critical area, so
Okay.
landward of the marsh or landward of the beach on the beachfront. And that has been the city's practice for many years, basically since we rewrote the zoning ordinance. But one of the things we asked Katie to do when she got started was make sure our codes match what we do. You all know how our codes grow, so sometimes every section doesn't get updated. And this was a definition that was out of date and needed to be fixed.
What line do they use on the beach?
The baseline, so the baseline is basically the beachfront critical line.
Okay,
More or less, it runs concurrently with the renourishment line.
right.
There are a few cases where the baseline comes to the street in what we call pocket beaches. But very generally speaking, the baseline runs the same as the renourishment line. And
Top of the seawalls.
Right.
In most instances, it's top of the seawall.
it functions the same way a critical line does. It's the line between on that side is the state's jurisdiction, on this side is our jurisdiction.
So when you say pocket beaches, it would be like at 10th East where it's that big, long, wide where they can bring the vehicles in and out?
Well, no, it'd be more like 303 East Arctic. I'd say there's probably 10 or so of them, and it's when they drew the renourishment line, they basically connected all the old seawalls, so they drew it straight.
Mhm.
But in some of those lots, there was no seawall, so the state's baseline follows the contours of the lot and comes all the way back to the street.
Okay.
So those folks, their entire lot is landward of seaward of the baseline.
But there aren't any lots like that with houses on them, right?
Yeah, 303
There are?
East Arctic is one.
Yeah.
There are several with houses. The most recent is 303 East Arctic, and they actually had to come to our Board of Zoning Appeals after they got a state permit to build seaward of the baseline, even though they were going to be farther back than their neighbors. They got a state permit, and then they had to come to us to get variances because all of our rules are predicated on the area landward of the baseline, and they had none. So they got approval to build out there. So this ordinance is
And that
kind of
was
a-
a pocket beach at one point.
right. Yeah.
Along with those two in the 200 lot.
And part of the requirements from the state, which we mirrored in our variance hearing or our variance approval, is that you can't build an erosion control structure on those lots. Basically, you're saying, I acknowledge that I'm building out in front of the state regulatory line, and I'm giving up my right to protect my property with a hard erosion control. So if and when the lot ever erodes at 303 East Arctic, those people can't protect their property. And in theory, they have to take the house down, but the state hasn't successfully tested that requirement yet.
So they built knowing that if there were a huge hurricane event or something and that their dirt was washed away, there's no repairing it?
According to the permit from the state and now our variance permit, in theory, if anything ever causes that lot to erode, the house has to go.
But they have fantastic dunes in front of them.
Mm.
When we did the renourishment stuff last year,
Mm-hmm.
you could just see the line go down the beach. You'd never know it walking by the house.
Okay.
Yeah, they're in good shape. There are some that are further out towards the east end, maybe have less time than 303 East Arctic, but 303 East Arctic is pretty good.
Your biggest problem is your septic tanks. It's not those houses, they're going nowhere. Those pilings are 16, 18 feet in the ground. House is gonna stay there. But if it inundates the septic system, the house becomes condemned.
Okay.
And in theory, we could say take it down. And like Aaron said, it hadn't been tested.
That's not tested.
Okay, we won't do that.
And Aaron, the height of the house, it goes from the highest point on the lot, correct?
Well, actually, we measure our height from BFE, so it goes from wherever you're required to
Okay.
elevate to. There is an absolute limit, and it's 50 feet from the highest point of the nearest adjacent street, but that rarely comes into play.
Okay.
But wherever you're required to go up to, we give you 36 feet on top of that. It's written as 35 plus 1, but it's 36 feet. We have a 2-foot freeboard, so you actually only get 34 feet of house because we make you go up an extra 2 feet.
Right.
And as you all know, the maps changed
Are they out?
recently.
They
They're
are?
out. They are effective as of the 29th. And Katie actually is working on something that she's going to introduce at council next week in a work session to make sure our height limit doesn't penalize people because the new maps dropped. No one ever anticipates the
Right.
map to drop. So we want to see if maybe now we can give people some wiggle room to build to the old maps, which are higher and in theory accurate, because no one really believes that just because the maps drop, the water's going to drop too.
In fact, it's going up, so.
You
Yes,
should note
it's-
that those maps were drawn in 2016.
Those
They don't
maps-
take into account hurricanes,
Those
Irma,
maps were
Florence.
actually, the data behind the maps was taken in 2009. So all of the development that's happened since 2009 is not put into the modeling of those maps. The preliminary maps with that modeling were released in 2016, and FEMA does not do any future planning, sea level rise, or that means that the impacts of Matthew, Joaquin from 2015, Irma, none of that modeling is backed within our maps either.
And is the city talking about how to address people who have had permits taken out before the FEMA maps changed that now will allow them to do different things? Will they need to go back and file for more permits? For, in other words, I couldn't build living space and now I can?
If you pulled your permit prior to the new maps taking into effect, we made you build to the old maps.
Meaning they would be higher, so you had actually more elevation from grade to your first floor because those BFEs are so much higher.
Right.
So it's funny, so I used to work for Charleston County, and we don't have max height restrictions, and so a lot of people wanted to have the ability to build lower for accessibility, whatever, and so people were holding their plans until January 29th. It's the opposite in Folly because people were trying to get their maps, get their permits in before the maps went effective so they could have that height, they could park under, because currently we are decentivizing people to go higher so they don't have to sacrifice heated square footage for their home. Because we have base flood elevations capped at the max height. So you can go up here, but this line isn't moving. So we are working potentially on reworking that wording so that 34 feet that Aaron talked about of that heated square footage stays here, and you can basically go up to that 50-foot height limit that he talked about at the crown of the road. But you have the ability to utilize parking if you needed to, because right now, even with the 2-foot freeboard, some houses may only be elevated 6 feet. And so if they wanted to have a 9 or 10 foot like drive under, you would have to sacrifice heated square footage to be able to do that. And I don't know, as resilience and future planning like we talked about, if that's the stance that we want to take for new construction.
But that doesn't
going forward.
affect this.
That does not affect this. No,
No.
we kind of went on a
Okay.
tangent a
Yeah.
little bit.
Okay.
So what we're talking about now is just the definition of high ground, and like Erin said, it's basically just a clarification, so we can fall back on it to include anything landward of the baseline, because right now it just talks about critical areas specifically in the definition. And since we've strengthened our zoning ordinance for that dune management area and referenced the baseline more, we just wanted to add that high ground clarification into this.
Okay, so we need is this going back to council now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, we need a motion to recommend this back to council.
So moved.
Give a second. Okay. You wanna call the roll?
Mr. Norton? Ms. Stubblefield?
Yes.
Ms. Pratt?
Yes.
Ms. Pace?
Yes.
Mr. Merritt?
Yes.
Mr. Carter?
Yes.
Ms. Kennedy?
Yes.
Passes. So that will go, actually to council for first reading next Tuesday.
All right. Comprehensive plan update?
Erin, do you want to start off with your housing element, or do you want me to talk about resilience
No,
only?
I'll start with mine.
Okay.
So, we've been working our way through the draft, updating things to account for what's happened in the last 5 years. This one, when I started it, I thought it would be one of the most straightforward ones, but it actually got kind of tricky because the American Community Survey, which is a census data tool that we use, all the numbers for this year seemed really wonky compared to 5 years ago. One big example is we used the 2013 survey when we wrote the 2015 plan. It said there were 2,640 housing units in Folly Beach. Well, the 2019 plan, or community survey, says there are 3,023 housing units in Folly Beach. And while we have definitely had some growth, we have not added 400 residential uses in 5 years. So I've got a note in here that's, some of these numbers need to be taken with a grain of salt, and they're probably the result of either better counting this time or worse counting last time. There's no good way to
Yep.
phrase it.
Some change in methodology.
So we've got all the updated stats in here. There has been residential growth. Kings Flats was a big one that happened in the last 5 years. That's 30 odd units. If everything goes according to plan, about 20 more are going to be built at the plan farm here. And in general, we're working on a 12 to 18 house permits per year here. So it is growing slowly, but we've not added 400 units. What's interesting is also the percentages of two and multifamily units compared to single family units. Back 5 years ago, 43% of the units out here were multifamily or duplexes, and these days it's 35%. We have issued more permits for single family residents. Even Kings Flats, they're detached units, so they count as single family. I'm not sure if it's that enough to actually have skewed the percentages that much. We are definitely issuing more single family permits than multi or two family, and that's basically a factor that there's no land for multifamily development of note. We've got some lots in the DC district that can hold 3 units, but even the folks who are building those aren't building a triplex. They're taking advantage of our rules and building smaller scale, more compatible buildings. So almost everything that gets out here now is a single family house or a duplex. We haven't had any true multifamily.
We should have 2 coming to DRB next month that's doing a duplex and a single family home on the same lot in downtown commercial.
Right next to Low Life?
Yes.
So, I think that's where we've really seen the
Only
benefit.
vacant lot in that area.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this is a good side effect of the rules that you guys helped pass to allow us to break up the duplexes and the multifamily units, because certainly 3 houses, 3 cottages on a lot is bigger than one giant apartment in the middle of the lot.
Erin, I'm assuming from last city council meeting that the sewer was not extended by the council to the house at 206 East Arctic?
Right, they did not
Okay.
extend it. So that's the first 5-year update on their housing and ownership types. We updated the total number of units, again, going on faith that the census count is correct. Over on the back page, just to note, I think the vacation and short-term rentals update is good to know. In 2015, it's actually kind of funny to read back through this. In 2015, we issued 618 rental registrations. Last year, we issued 1,033 rental registrations. Part of that, almost all of that increase, can be directly tied to increased compliance and enforcement ability thanks to our rental software. We got that going in 2018, and it is very hard to trick. To date, no one has called me up and said, my neighbor's renting a house and you don't know about it, because we have been able to go in and find the Airbnb, VRBO, Bob's Realty, whoever's got it listed, we can find it. Sometimes it takes us a while to track them down and get them licensed, but we are aware of, I'm going to confidently say, 99.9% of all the rentals on Folly Beach. So there's been a tremendous growth in the number of rental licenses. I don't think it's necessarily because there are 400 more people renting than there were before. It's just that we've been able to capture that more thoroughly. So that was a good investment that has paid for itself many times over and continues to do so. In 2018, we looked at our rental rules and we came up with a system to regulate the effects of rentals, if not the rentals themselves. We put a noise, a no amplified music, special event cap, and a 4 strike and you're out noise ordinance in place. So far, since 2018, we've only had one property that got to the limit. It actually got there twice, but it was sold in between. It seems to be working well. The owners and rental agents have been very responsive when they get our letters. If your property gets a strike, the police department notifies Heather now, it was me. She writes a certified letter, copies the agent, copies the owner, and those have been getting really good responses, especially from owners who may not know what's going on. I do believe that going forward there may be room for more rental regulations in some form or another. You guys get to define the contours of that and send it up to City Council and let them dwell on it. But I think one of the things that Katie's going to be working with you guys on the next few years is whether or not we're at a point to regulate rentals a little more than we have in the past. We got a good strong start with regulating the effects of rentals, and now we'll see if the conversation switches to actually regulating the rentals themselves.
Aaron, because I'm new, historically, has there been any discussion of limiting, or is it even legal to limit the minimum length of a rental to, say, 3 days instead of these 1 and 2 nighters that seem to flip and stay up till 3 in the morning?
So it's definitely a legal option that we have.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that other cities do. It complicates enforcement, but it is something that can be done. It is something that has come up perennially whenever we talk about rentals. Some common themes are regulating the length of stay, regulating the geographic areas where rentals can be, and regulating the total number of licenses. On Sullivan's Island, for example, when they stopped rentals, if you had a license, you could keep it, but once you lost it, you lost it. So those are the 3 themes that come up whenever we talk about rentals. So I imagine they will come up again when you talk about rentals next. But it is definitely a tool used by many communities. Next up, we have the housing value and mean income. Those are just number substitutes there, saying that the median value of a single-family home on Folly Beach is now $569,900. The mean income for Folly is now $90,361. And if you run all the math and go back to that handy chart the Census Bureau puts out, 28% of full-time residents on Folly Beach are still paying more than their 30% rule of thumb affordability. So that's 30% of the people on the beach not can't afford it, but are paying more than your standard financial plan or rule of thumb for their housing. So that's still a pretty big percentage. What can you do about it when you live in a Barrier Island resort community with extremely expensive real estate? I'm not sure there's too much we can do about it, but it is worth noting. Flood and hazard insurance, this is another thing where I think there have been some good changes since 2015. The big one is we got our CRS score lowered. It was a huge accomplishment, so a real shout out to Eric and also the city council who funded the hiring of a nationally known consultant who came in here and really helped us get our stuff straight. Because of that work, I think it was an $18,000 investment for
I
his.
think Eric said like 15 or something.
Yeah.
Pennies on the dollar. And
Yeah.
David Stroud is amazing.
Less than $20,000 we paid this consultant, and as a result, I think we dropped 2 percentages. But now you get a 30% discount on your flood insurance. So it's a major accomplishment for a small town with resources that we have.
One of 2 communities in the state. The other one being Charleston County, which is now a 3, which Folly will get to this year. Don't worry.
So good job to our floodplain management folks. And then the new maps that we were talking about. If you have flood insurance, if you have a mortgage, if you have flood insurance, if you don't have a mortgage and you have flood insurance, call your insurance agent and make sure that they are adjusting your policies.
But have patience with them, because they're getting 1,000 calls.
Yeah, definitely. Hopefully you got in line last year when I warned you and said, put me first.
Yeah.
Yeah, mine last year dropped from 8,000 to 3,000.
Wow.
That's
8,000?
8,000.
As
Yeah.
high as your house is? That's crazy.
VE
You're
zones
in a
have
VE
that
zone?
extra premium that makes it,
Ugh.
yeah, it's a lot.
How yours is VE and mine is AE? I'll never understand.
I went from 3,600 to 450 like Friday.
Wow.
Now, those VE zones we have been changed.
Yeah.
But you got like a really, really good insurance agent.
I know.
So do I. He's working on
Me
it.
too.
She's not me.
I know.
Already
It's
done.
long.
Well,
And that's it. There's really no update on the housing age. We have more newer houses than we have, but I don't think it's enough really to move the bottom line. We did, as you were all aware, we did talk about our historic preservation rules and regulations, and that got weeded out. We do have that increased demo fee, but that didn't quite make it to the plan here. So housing, not a really exciting element. I don't know how to phrase it. There's just not much to say other than the numbers. So those are your 5-year updates for housing.
okay.
And now I can, so I wrote this memo for you guys on the resilience element. This will be a new element added this year, due to a state law that was passed in September, mandating a resilience element be added to comprehensive plans. Luckily, Charleston County kind of led the way on that front, so we will be using their plan as a guideline. I had my starting point was reading their plan, and I actually worked with the lady that wrote that plan. She was my former boss at the county, so she does really great work. And then I started reading our existing long-term plans here at Folly, which we have a ton of, which is fantastic. So laying great groundwork for this resilience element so we can start implementing some planning strategies and identifying needs and goals through this resilience element based on what's already called out in these long-term plans. So that is what I'm doing right now. I have gotten some great feedback from you guys and council members on strategies and needs and goals to add pertaining to resilience. I am definitely more than happy to, I'm welcoming that. If you guys, either if you want to talk about it now, if you want to send me an email with some more detailed or outlined thoughts. This element will basically address all natural hazards that affect Folly, as well as some resilient systems that are impacted by those hazards. So thinking transportation, economic resilience, even food insecurity. So anything kind of along those lines will be addressed within this resilience element. And then we'll do a full needs and goals assessment, probably in April, Aaron, when we'll start identifying all of those, and really looking at projects and strategies that we wanna implement through this, 5-year comprehensive plan. I hope to have a draft element for you guys to review by the next meeting. Again, I'm working on that now. I just started like my in-depth outline, today, so, I'll start working on that, but I would love to hear any feedback or, anything that you guys have to say about resilience element.
Any comments on any of that?
Are we just like voting to approve this and send it to council, the housing element?
So yeah, for the housing element, you don't even necessarily need to have a vote, tonight unless you have any
Just
questions or
looking over it.
any amendments that you want changed. But it will be incorporated into the revised draft, and this is the next, other than Katie's new element, this is the next to last existing element that we have. We have the priority investment element to go, and we're waiting on council to approve their strategic plan next week, and so we'll work that. And after that, this will be done, and it will go to council for approval, but you guys don't necessarily have, well, until it's all done, you don't have to vote on it.
Are there any, maybe this would go under this section, any incentives for homeowners or any builder out here to have increased wind mitigation features built in, or green features, that kinda?
So, with green features specifically, kind of went by the wayside during the historic preservation community. That committee started with 2 goals, green building and historic preservation guidelines, and we worked up some stuff, but it didn't survive council.
Okay.
So green building, stuff like LED or LEED rating,
Mhm.
et cetera. Wastewater control, all the things, kind of didn't make it for a variety of reasons. The wind mitigation is something that's never been proposed. So I think that if you wanted to get it there on Katie's element, this element anywhere.
Well, it would be a good resiliency.
What year was that, Aaron? Do you remember?
I want to say it was 2018 or 19. It
Okay,
all
so
kind of
recent.
runs together.
I'd like to talk with Katie, not inside the meeting necessarily, about part of the resilience being the vegetation. I think the city made a big step forward in the tree mitigation. And I think that as far as resiliency and continuing to develop the island and making sure that maybe you talk to homeowners who are getting these building permits about, like, hey, maybe don't plant a live oak under the power lines kind of thing, but also the importance of shade canopy and maybe tweak that a little bit.
And one thing that's been discussed in the past, and this is definitely the time to bring it up again, especially when we go over our goals and objectives, is our tree. We have a really great tree protection ordinance. We protect trees that some other folks don't. However, we let you cut down any protected tree that's in the footprint of your home with no requirement that the home be sited to have the least impact on protected trees. So if
Why don't we fix that?
We haven't. So
Okay.
if you've only got one giant oak tree on your lot, and it's the only tree, it's a protected tree, but you want your house right there, it's okay, as long as you plant back 15 baby oak trees. So we have a mitigation requirement, but we don't have any requirement to force people to
Move
site
their
with
house.
the least impact. So that's something that's come up and been batted around before. But we
Yeah,
can't.
That's touchy though, because as a homeowner buying the lot, I think that just requires a lot of thought as far as, like, if that one oak tree is blocking the marsh view, which is the reason that lot was purchased, I think that's maybe trampling on some property owner right toes that might be difficult.
But
It's
doesn't
definitely
City of
definitely
Charleston
a
have
balance
that
between priorities.
requirement?
I believe so. I would have to research the city of Charleston's
I know,
tree ordinance.
is Solo Green, I don't know if they're in the city or county, but we looked at a lot there
Solo Green is
and there was
Charleston.
no,
Yeah.
you weren't cutting down a lot, like, it was questionable if you could build or not because
Of
of
how the
the
trees
oak
were
trees,
situated.
right?
But
So-
again, then you're taking away somebody's $500,000 lot value. I mean, I think that's really
But if
tough.
the ordinance is already in place, they can know that before they make the decision to
Right.
purchase the lot.
I just think in Folly, there's what,
Not a lot of
Luann,
lots
a
left.
dozen buildable lots left. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't
And
think
that
that's
would sometime require somebody to tear something down.
exactly. I don't think there's
Mhm.
probably enough of those to maybe warrant spending our time on that as more opposed to education or as
Mhm.
houses turn over, addressing some of those issues perhaps.
There's one lot that I know of now that another agent is dealing with it.
Mhm.
And it has a huge oak tree in the middle of the lot
Yeah.
where they want to put the house. And so she's called and said, what do we do? I said, well, you're gonna have to ask for mitigation from the
Mitigation.
city.
Mhm.
You know, if you wanna move the, or if you can't move the house. And it all revolved around a view.
Mhm.
It was a view corridor that they were looking at.
Right.
And so,
Yep.
Example is the house next door to me,
yes.
the
Mhm.
trees that were
Mhm.
removed to build that house.
Mhm.
Or you can just wait for Dominion to come along and they'll.
Yeah. I'll contact you, decide on it.
Okay, any other comments on any of this then before we move? Okay,
Sorry, I do wanna kind of chime in, and we can talk about this more in depth when we talk about our needs and, goals for what we wanna do for the plan, but, I do think incorporating some connectivity throughout the island, so it kinda goes with vegetation, but, we have the ped path, on West Second Street that's going in, and I know that Parks and Rec is kind of getting up their recreation and different parks established throughout the island. I think connectivity could interweave throughout this resilience element from an economics standpoint to, you know, have more reasons to come to Folly than just the beach. And having some resilience from a transportation and a parking standpoint as well, if people aren't trying to flock to Arctic, if they are cool with parking on Indian or Huron, because there's more accessibility and connectivity throughout the island. That's gonna be something that I'm going to try to incorporate this on top of, you know, the floodplain management, sea level rise stuff that really is at the heart of what I do and what I love to work on. But I just kind of wanted to throw that comment in
be
there.
careful with that one, because the people that live on those back streets do not want those cars there, okay? So be careful with that one.
Yeah.
They get a little bit testy.
Mhm.
All right, any other comments for anybody?
Not that issue.
Okay, we need to elect a chair and a vice chair, so do I have any motions, please?
You still wanna serve?
Why don't you get somebody else?
I nominate Luann.
Okay, any other nominations?
Randy, you wanna do it?
I'm more effective not being in charge.
Me too.
As a commentator?
Me too.
All right.
Okay, you're gonna have to call for the vote.
Well, we can just, I'm drawing a blank.
You're drawing a blank.
Does anyone oppose it? You know, what's the term?
Nominated by acclamation
Yes. All right,
or elected by acclamation.
I'm gonna go that route.
Okay, good.
Okay, we need a vice chair.
I'd be willing to do that. Michael serves. I took Adam's place. He was doing it.
So,
So we
Randy?
nominate,
Second.
yeah,
Yeah,
Okay.
nominate in second.
okay.
Okay. All in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
Okay, that was easy enough.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks, guys. Congratulations, officers.
Okay, we need a staff comment. Anybody, staff want to comment?
Well, thank you for having me.
Welcome.
Excited that this is my
Welcome.
That's
first
welcome.
official meeting. Look forward to working with you guys throughout the year.
Okay, commission comments, anybody else want to make a comment? We're off record.
Thank
Well,
you,
we're
guys.
happy to have you here,
You
Katie.
guys, give us